Yeah, good day, everybody on YouTube. Welcome back, and here we're reassembling this axle on this 2015 Ram 2500. I did one video on taking this axle out, one video on installing the universal joint, and now we're putting the truck together. And there it's slid into place. You can tell it's like clutches back in. Okay, that is slid into place. Now we're going to take, then of course, put our wheel bearing back. In addition, when you're putting the wheel bearing back in, the ABS sensor and the wire faces towards the top, so in case you did forget, not out to the sides or anything, and of course not the bottom. And the key on this, you can tell there's those splines on the axle shaft, and there's splines in the bearing, and to get them to start in. Now I'm going to take here and start trying to get this to go back in without getting real brutal on it, but it's not really working out real well so far. The big objective when you're doing this, I don't want to take and hurt those lug nut studs with the hammer, and this one reason I don't want to take and hit on the outside, and then potentially if you'd hit real hard on like around that outer flange where the lug nut studs are, you could hurt the wheel bearing, but that's not working on doing that. So I want to take a socket and the extension here and see if I can start it back in. Once it starts in a little bit, then you can start the bolts in, and that'll pull it in. And I do believe we're making some headway. Carefully, I was using the ball peen part of the ball peen hammer and just carefully tapping towards the center part of the outer part. Now I'm going to take the chisel again and just try to work around the flange. And it's starting to, again, go back in. We'll take a little different view here and show you in a second. But now we're going to take and just work around the center again, nice and, again, I'm not tapping real hard. Okay, I just need to get it a little bit more so we can start the bolt, so I am going to take and carefully. And if you see, I'm holding the hammer way at the top. I'm barely swinging, just trying to get it to, and it is going in. Like I say, just a little bit, and then once the bolts start, then we'll just let the bolts do the work for us. It'd be nice if they had a hole stamped in where the lug nut studs are, that you could take and use like a punch straight through and tap it back in, but that would have made life actually too easy. That's number two. I think they designed this stuff. They want you to actually break it there, so you buy more parts, or actually get disgusted and you take it to their dealership, which a lot of times they don't do any better. They break stuff, but they can charge you a lot of money to do basically what you can do yourself at home. But it is going now, and now I'm getting it started, and I'm getting it with just the hammer and chisel back at that where it sits against the knuckle, safe to take and hit hard, no problem on that. Also, when you're tapping this back into place, watch where your bolt holes are. Keep them lined up. The bolts will start in when it gets that time. Which, again, now I'm sure we can pretty much soon do that. It's actually about back in, other than a small bit where it does sit anyhow. Indeed, the big thing on working on cars is to keep cool. Even if it makes you mad, is keep your cool, and it'll work. Getting mad don't really get anything but the blood pressure raised. And there you can, other than about probably like about 3/16 of an inch, it is back in. There's a close-up of where we're at. And from there I am sure we're going to put the bolts in, and it'll pull the rest of the way with just the bolts once you're to that point. And without a doubt, I'll just show you here a little bit more. That is what we're going to do. Here's go grab our bolt here and start turning them in. There, put the one in the one of the harder ones to get on the front edge of it started in. And as long as my holes are lined up where the wheel bearing and the knuckle, and there you are turning in. And I'm trying to show you where they do sit in, which if you took it apart, you know this already. And get the other side put in, the two bolts. I'm going to put the one in on the bottom first. if you're having trouble getting the bolts lined up and started in, now like I'm not getting that one in, you just have to take and tap the wheel bearing a little bit and a little one way or the other till they do start in. But it's not a big problem. You don't need to, like I say, tap upwards. But okay, now we're going to take and turn our wheel to turn our bolts there, make it a little bit easier to access the ones on the front side. Furthermore, if you watched the disassembly video, I did the same thing when I disassembled it. It helps some, although you can keep the wheel straight and accomplish the same goal. But now with the socket and that, it is starting in. And put the ratchet on it and let's start turning this. It's grabbed the hold now into the threads. Furthermore, to begin with, I'm going to tighten them up, but not real super tight till we get all four of them for sure starting to turn in. In addition, before I start tightening another one on the front side of the knuckle, I'm going to turn the wheel here and grab one on the rear side, and that sort of evens out the... If you get one on each side, they should be definitely lined up and work with no problem, and then the other two can be taken care of. And then once they're all started, then go back through and we'll really tighten them up. Also take notice, it just makes the most logical sense to evenly pull the bearing in. I chose the one diagonally on the rear side of the steering knuckle on the bottom because we did the one on the front, the top one. And again, it sort of gives you even pressure until that the other two won't make any difference. Like I say, the order, which I've gone now, I'm just going to take and move up and tighten the one on the top on the rear side of the knuckle. And you can see real good on that top one. You can see the threads of the bolt coming out from the front of the wheel bearing. And now we're going to take and we're going to tighten the one on the bottom on the front side. I'm not going to mess around with turning the wheel. I'm just going to let it where it's at. I'm sort of getting tired of cranking on the steering wheel back and forth, and it's going together, and it's about there now. Really? Yeah, that's 10 miles. Yeah, indeed, the 10 miles is an exaggeration, but it does seem like it's taking forever to turn in. But it's about there, and we got it snugged up. Now we're just going to have to, once we do this one, which we can really tighten it now since we have them all, I'm going to then go back and really tighten the other ones on it. But I'm going to say that's tight enough. And we're going to take and tighten the one, since we really tightened the one on the bottom front, do the one on the top and the rear, really snug it up, and we'll grab the bottom one here in the rear. And we only got one more to do, which is the top one on the front side of the wheel bearing. And then we have them all snugged in and tightened up to where they're going to be tightened till the next time it has to be torn apart for some reason, whether it be a wheel bearing or another one of those axle joints, whichever comes first. But who knows when that will be. Again, I'm working on this truck for another person. He said with the fuel prices right now, he's not really planning on running it too often. He has a diesel Volkswagen too, so till winter comes. Now, once it starts snowing and that, he'll be stuck running them when the roads are bad. But I'm just going to check them here one more time to be extra sure they are tight, and just take and give them another about a half turn, quarter to a half a turn. And I'm going to take now and put the nut on the center for the actual shaft nut. And that turned on nice, which means we didn't hurt the threads on the axle shaft when it was apart. Now I'm just going to finish tightening it there, but well, not finish tightening it, but tighten it as tight as I can with the impact wrench. And then we're going to, this is how I tore it apart, use the crowbar, wedge it in, and we were going to go get our 3/4 inch drive ratchet and the 1 5/16 inch socket and snug it up tight. I don't know the exact torque on it. I assure you it's over 100 foot-pounds because I know it was tight coming apart, but I'm going to take it and make it as tight as I feasibly can with that, and there it is. And then before we go further, this is important. The new grease axle universal has a grease fitting, and we are going to take and pump it with grease. And there is a close-up. You can see we have it full of grease. It's starting to come out around the rubber seals around it, spinning around. So again, that's as much as you can put in, because what's squishing out's not doing you any good, but hopefully that'll help make it last longer. And again, in servicing the truck, you grease it every time you change oil. And now we're going to just put the brake dust shield back on. I took it off. You could do this without taking it off. I mentioned that in the disassembly video, but this came off with no problem on the truck. So I thought it did make breaking the wheel bearing free from the knuckle easier. Just one last thing to perhaps getting your knuckles on, which it did help, because again, it sticks up about 2-3 inches above the knuckle itself in your way. Okay, and I got all the both finger tight and dust shield. Again, use care on yours, because when you go to take it apart, these are fairly small bolts. If they are slightly tight and rusty, they would snap right off. Or perhaps you have a vehicle, been there, done that, a vehicle that's been in a lot more road salt, that the brake dust shields are rusted away anyhow, and there's none of them left, so then I guess you don't have the dust shield to contend with. Although for longevity of brake shoes and pads in the future and rotors, you should, if you have ones that are rusted away, replace them with good dust shields, but that's just a recommendation. Well, recommendation, and some states, like such as where I live, technically a dust shield has to be intact for state inspection if you live in a state that has yearly annual safety inspection. And now we're just going to slide the rotor back on. And there's that brake caliper. It didn't fall, it caught. I should have tied it fast, but no, it didn't fall. And now we're going to install our brake caliper bracket. Make sure these brake slides are working good, which they are. Man, without a doubt, they probably would have been stuck. But last year, I put new brakes and that on this truck. I mentioned it in the first video, and I got the slides lubricated up and working again. Okay, now that the brake caliper bracket in place, I'm going to start the top bolt in finger tight to hold it in place. And the next step, of course, is to install the lower bolt in finger tight and get it lined up. Like I say, let the whichever one you put in first, again, just put it in slightly snugged up so it'll move around till you get them both lined up. And now it's pretty much about as far as I can go doing that. Now we're going to tighten it up with the ratchet. And due to the size of the bolts and such in the truck, I'm using a 1/2-inch drive ratchet. They're pretty heavy duty. And again, I do not know the exact torque. It's not really the end of the world on something like this. It's not like you're installing a cylinder head or something, but make them tight. Again, they're big bolts, and it's a big heavy caliber. And again, we got that about taken care of. I'm just going to take, just for my own security, snug it a little more, and then we're going to put the inboard brake pad back in. I started to put the upper part of the pad in first and the bottom, but it seems to work a lot simpler if you put the bottom of the pad in first and then slide it in the top. You can see what I'm talking about here on the front one. Push down in the bottom, a little bit forward, line up in the groove, and voila, right where it does belong. And now we're going to grab our caliper, and we won't have to worry about that falling anymore. Make sure the flex hose isn't kinked, how you put it back on, and we're going to take and slide that into place, but it won't go back on. This is usually something they'll go on. I don't remember touching the brake pedal any with it off, but we're going to have to take and alter this problem, which is simple enough here in a second. After I get done with fighting with it, I want to take an old wore-out brake shoe. It was actually off this truck from last year in a C-clamp, and we're just going to slightly compress the brake caliper pistons. Yeah, the brake caliper pistons only need slightly compressed. It's not like when you're putting a brand new pair of lining on that you want to compress the piston the whole way. Of course, I'll admit these pistons shouldn't be really out that far anyhow, because those brake pads were on last year, and you can see they were still thick. I'm just going to take and give it a couple turns. And I'm using this wide mouth C-clamp that goes in, since it's a dual caliper piston, to help aid just push it back in, and that little bit should take care of it, and it should slide on now. Let's see what happens this time around, if it does the job or not. After I get done getting the kink out of the brake flex hose, they always seem to want to do that, but I have it now, and there I've started the bottom on, and there's our top. And also when you go to push them on, sometimes those brake pins they'll want to catch on, and there it is, back on where it belongs on the truck. Now we just have to take and put the bolts back in. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, you can feel free to let them in the comments sections below. Although, as far as doing the job itself, if you have a general idea and follow through with the video, everything here is shown on doing it. With the one exception, we did compress that brake caliper piston before you drive the vehicle. Of course, I didn't do it that much. Be sure you take and pump the brake pedal up to be sure, like I say, get the brake caliper pistons back into place. Although no more than I did on this, it shouldn't take much. And okay, now we're putting our lower bolt in, and now we're just going to take and tighten these up. 3/8 inch drive ratchet's fine on the bolts here that hold the caliper itself. They're not that big. They would snap off if you go tighten them too tight. Now we'll tighten them once we get the ratchet going the right direction. That always helps. Yeah, I do that all the time. You take stuff apart, it's in the counterclockwise position, and then you go to put it back together. You're not thinking until the first time you go to use it, and it's going the wrong way. But anyhow, we're going the right way now, tightening the clockwise, and we'll snug these up with the ratchets, and that's more than tight on those. Okay, now we're just going to reroute our wire for the ABS sensor out to the wheel bearing back into all its little holding little brackets. It's over the flex hose and here and there in every place. At least they're actually real simple to put back into the flex hose brackets. They slide in real easy where those rubber grommets sit around the wire. Now this one right here, there's a little bit, it's back over where the actual brake line itself sits, the metal bracket over the frame. I'm trying to show you the location of all of them here as I'm going along down it. And then this little clip here, also it clips between the wire and the metal brake line itself. And then we have two more here I undid at the back, and one more here again in this bracket, and then they will all be back in place. And that should be more than safe and secure and won't get tangled up in anything when you turn the wheel. Now we're going to slide the big tire and wheel out and put that back on. Yes, at least for myself, getting up there in late 40s, this tire and wheel's quite a handful. And basically, I hate to say this, I can't directly just lift this 20-inch tire and wheel on. I have to cheat here. I've lifted over, and then I take and I'll try here once. I'll sit down, and I just take and lift it up there carefully using my legs to help lift it until you find the lug nut studs. Yeah, perhaps I see them actually right there, and we can get a slip back on, and now we can get some lug nuts on it. And without a doubt, we'll take here, don't want it to fall back off. I'm anxious to get some started on these lug nuts, at least one out of the 8 of them, and we're in good shape now. It's not going to fall out of place. Well, I hope you found this video informative and helpful. If so, I'd appreciate hitting that like button and even consider subscribing. And like I say, I want to take and try to help out people there that want to try to do stuff on their own and save the big garage expense. And now we are going to take the impact wrench and tighten these up in a crosshatch pattern so the wheel pulls in evenly. And once the truck's down and off the jack, I do take and tighten the lug nuts with the torque wrench, which I'll put in the description in the text here, the Lugnut Torque. Alrighty, thank you again.